Frederick Douglass was an African-American social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and former slave. After experiencing slavery firsthand since he was a young boy and eventually achieving freedom, Douglass knew that he wanted to help other African-American slaves reach the level of freedom that he had accomplished. Douglass actively fought for civil rights for all of the oppressed, and he did so tirelessly, never giving up on his noble task. Many people were in Douglass's corner rooting for his success in the eventual abolition of slavery, and Abraham Lincoln happened to be one of his most powerful supporters. In 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected as the President of the United States, he, like Douglass, believed that freedom was an essential part of what it meant to be an American. So he set out to end the horrific practice of slavery. In 1863, Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation, a document intended to free every enslaved African American in the country. And this was perhaps the greatest moment in Douglass's life, the moment that he had been working towards since he was a young boy. On the evening of December 31st, in 1862, abolitionists across the nation gathered in various locations to await news of the president's decision. One of the largest gatherings was held in Boston at Tremont Temple, where about 3,000 people, including Frederick Douglass, gathered. The crowd was full of tension as they waited and worried that the president might decide against passing the proclamation. However, Lincoln did not plan to go back on his promise. Douglass later recalled, "Can any colored man or any white man friendly to the freedom of all men ever forget the night which followed the first day of January 1863, when the world was to see if Abraham Lincoln would prove to be as good as his word?" Douglass stated on that fateful night that a line of messengers was established between the telegraph office and the platform at Tremont Temple, where Douglass and many others gathered to be in each other's company when they heard the verdict. Any second, the door would open and they would know. Overwhelming joy or unbearable sadness. There were two distinct emotions that Douglass and his fellow abolitionists could have felt that night when they heard the news. Either everything they had worked at for so long had been worth it, or yet again, their work had no impact on the people of America. Douglass felt the buzz of conversation around him, and feelings of nervousness and excitement racked his brain. Which would it be? Liberation or more time in chains? They had been waiting all day, and by 10 o'clock in the evening, the anticipation was almost unbearable. By 11 o'clock, there was still no proclamation, but they were willing to stay there all night if they had to. Finally, Judge Thomas Russell went to the telegraph office and rushed back with the text in hand. He read aloud, "All persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free." Douglass and his fellow abolitionists erupted into cheers and a celebration that stretched all night long. When what Douglass called the trump of Jubilee was heard, joy and gladness exhausted all forms of expression, he wrote, from shouts of praise to sobs and tears. The joy that was felt throughout those at Tremont Temple and those all across the United States was pure and beautiful, and Douglass remembers seeing happiness like he had never seen before in his whole life. Douglass recalls the moment that the judge came into the meeting house with the news in the speech he gave in 1863 at the Cooper Institute. He told his audience of the reactions of the men and women surrounding him when they first heard of the Emancipation Proclamation being passed. "I shall never forget that memorable night," he recalled, "when in a distant city I waited and watched at a public meeting with 3,000 others not less anxious than myself for the word of deliverance which we have heard read today. Nor shall I ever forget the outburst of joy and thanksgiving that rent the air when the lightning brought to us the Emancipation Proclamation. I never saw enthusiasm before," he said. "I never saw joy before. Men, women, young and old, were up, hats and bonnets were in the air, and we have 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and 3 cheers for about everybody else." Frederick Douglass wrote that December 31st, 1862, was a day for poetry and song, a new song. "These cloudless skies, this balmy air, this brilliant sunshine, are in harmony with the glorious morning of liberty about to dawn upon us." During this reflection, Douglass also mentions the moral impact of emancipation on all Americans. Douglass states, "We are all liberated by this proclamation. Everybody is liberated. The white man is liberated, the black man is liberated, the brave men now fighting the battles of their country against rebels and traitors are now liberated. I congratulate you upon this amazing change, the amazing approximation toward the sacred truth of human liberty." It is clear in this moment that Douglass feels empowered by the proclamation. It has been one of the most pivotal experiences in his life. Not too long before, Douglass considered giving up on his fight for freedom because he thought that nothing he ever did was going to work. Thankfully, Douglass pursued his motivation to ensure freedom for everyone, and his work will forever go down in history. One of the most prominent black men in the 19th century, Frederick Douglass will forever be known for his efforts to eradicate slavery and for being the face of African American abolitionists during his time. Even though the proclamation did not end slavery in itself, it is what began a chain reaction of events that led to the eventual end of the horrific practice. Douglass described the document's impact by saying, "This proclamation changed everything."